Hey there, friends, it's Nick. This is episode 444 of the Story Hacker podcast. So listen, do you remember when you were young? It might be easier for some of you than others. But remember when you were small, early-ish years, you could write and talk and think and what have you. You were asked to write a story for school. Okay, and you, or maybe someone in your class, but probably you, let's face it, you wrote a story about monsters and about being chased and about scary stuff. And then at the end, right at the climax, when you were about to be whatevered, killed, dismembered, whatevered, captured, caught, you wrote the fateful words, "And then I woke up, and it was all a dream." Do you remember that? Do you remember that? And even then, I'm guessing, there was a sense of anticlimax. There was a sense of getting away with something. And certainly if you ever heard a story like that, it's so frustrating. It's the classic I think it's Deus Ex Machina, I think, which is Greek for God out of the machine. And it was the phrase they used to use in Greek theatre for when, you've watched the whole play and watched the characters tying themselves up in knots, getting into more and more difficult, complicated situations, and then right at the end, where you think it can't get any worse, you're proved right, because what happens is effectively a god, one of the Greek gods, comes onto the stage at the end and goes, "Well, this is terrible. We can't have this. This is what's going to happen," and he kind of magics the solution. It's a bit like, you get that sometimes, I think, with Doctor Who. I have to admit, I've stopped watching Doctor Who at the moment, but I remember the sort of the sonic screwdriver of Matt Smith's Doctor Who kind of turning into a magic wand, and he says, "Oh, I can just do this," and he waves his magic wand, and somehow a solution arises. And I was thinking about this yesterday because I'm thinking a lot about the Jim Collins Flywheel effect at the moment, and we've talked about that before on this podcast. But a brilliant concept, really, which is really about how the things that we are doing in business need to not only be positive, but become a positive loop, a flywheel, a virtuous circle where, yes, it might be hard to crank the wheel the first time, but the second time is easier. The third time is easier still, and the 100th time, you're going through this process. And it's rather like, in some sense, this podcast, because the idea of the flywheel really is that each stage sort of inevitably leads to the next stage. So I might say, for example, I'm going to sit down every day and think about something related to this area that I am trying to learn and become expert in and to build my new business in, which is obviously storytelling in business, right? If I do that every day, it is inevitable, however many days that I miss, that I miss the mark, it's inevitable that I will over time increase my understanding, increase the power of the distinctions I can make, and increase my overall kind of value in this field. If I continually increase the value in my field, it's inevitable that I will better be able to serve my clients and give them better results and generate them better results. If I generate them better results, it's inevitable that my reputation will spread and the pipeline of work coming to me will grow. Now, this is something that's been happening to me this year. If the pipeline of work continues to grow, it's inevitable that the business will make more money. If the business makes more money, it's inevitable that I will have the time to really sit and think and make sure I'm doing my best work. If I have time to make sure I'm sitting and thinking and doing my best work, it is inevitable that over time my understanding will become deeper. Do you see how it's going? It's a virtuous circle. And actually, one thing I didn't including that, of course, actually is the literal podcast, which is in some sense a way for me to sharpen the thinking and articulation of these kind of ideas. But can you see how there is a kind of a flywheel effect, and like the first, probably 200 podcasts, were cranking out work, really. But over time, I've said before, if you do something like I'm doing now, obviously half of them are below average, right? This is a law. We can't skate around this. But over time, I am definitely building my distinctions. And if you go back, if you've listened to the podcast from, I think, even the very start, I'll talk about, building tone of voice. And very early on, I was realizing that actually what it was a tool, not a tool of marketing, actually, but a tool of thinking, which has been really important. And all of which leads back to the it was all a dream story, because the fundamental problem with that story is that at the end, we lose the chain of cause and effect. And I think one of the things that I've realised in learning to write novels and applying those things to the business that I built before the agency, but also to the business I'm building now, is we really, in both those cases, novel writing and business, we need strong chains of cause and effect. If we don't have that, the story crumbles. And if we don't have that in business, the business crumbles. The only difference being that if you want to do business well, you need to read Jim Collins's monograph about the flywheel effect. Because what we want to do there is create a virtuous circle so that the final cause and effect in our process leads inevitably to the first cause where we started, so that we spiral upwards. Anyway, that's a thought for Saturday. I hope it makes sense. I think it does. Thanks for listening, and remember, your story means business.